Learning to read music, part 1. I'm going to do this in 2 parts. In the first part, what we're looking at is how to determine what string you're playing, what note you're playing. And part 2 will be looking at rhythm. That will be another week. But in part 1, what we're concerned with is, here's all these little marks on the page. How do they tell us what string or strings that we're going to play? Reading music, learning to read music, is actually not that difficult. I mean, if you know how to read, that's many magnitudes harder than learning to read music, learning to read English or any other language. It's much harder. So one of the first things, if you go to learn to read music, is just make sure that you're not intimidated by it. It can take some time, and obviously it comes easier for some people than others, but if you approach it with the idea that, oh my god, learning to read music, I can never do that, that's obviously going to make it much harder. So don't be intimidated. And it's actually, it's very, unlike, say, learning to read English, which contains all these words that, like rough and, my mind's drawing a blank, but all these crazy contradictions, I before E, except after C, blah, blah, blah. Wow. Whereas music is so logical and makes so much sense. Or at least it always follows the rules. So let's get started. Let me introduce you to a staff, or in this case, 2 staffs. So a staff is this bunch of lines. And here we have 2 staves joined together to form one so-called grand staff. And we can see by this little curly Q and the fact that these lines go through both staves, that they're part of the same larger line. And this grand staff is used by the piano and keyboard instruments and by the harp. And that's because we're playing often a bunch of notes at the same time, and we need one staff often to indicate which notes the left hand's playing, and one staff to indicate which notes the right hand's playing. So I'm just going to focus on this top staff right now. That's generally the staff that tells you what your right hand is playing. The right hand is playing these higher notes up here. Notes are indicated on the staff by the means of a circle, and sometimes that circle is solid, sometimes it's hollow, and sometimes it has a little line coming out of it, a stem. Sometimes that stem has a little tail on it. But the main thing that we're going to be concerned with is the circle and where the circle is. The whole, is it solid? Does it have a stem? Does the stem have tails? That has to do with rhythm. That has to do with how long the note is in proportion to the other notes. So we're going to ignore that for the moment. What we're just focused on is where this little circle is on the staff. So we have all these lines, and this little circle can either be in the middle of the line, so the line's going right through the middle of the circle, or it can be in between 2 lines. So let's find middle C. This is middle C right here. And this top staff that we're looking at is in treble clef. And how we know that is we have this funny curly Q right at the beginning of the staff. You'll notice that it's different than this other one down below. So this funny little one, this particular funny one, is called a treble clef, and it indicates that middle C is found right here. This is a middle C. And it's actually a little bit confusing because it's outside of all these lines that make up the staff. So let's move up and let's look at a G. Here's a G right here. A G in treble clef is indicated by a note, a little round circle, that's running right through this second line from the bottom. So it's not the bottom line, but the second line from the bottom, and it's right on that line. So there's our G. Now, what if we move this little circle that indicates a note down so it's in between these two lines? So it's in between the one that's on right now and this bottom line. Well, it's beautiful because what happens is we just go down one string lower to an F, and that's what that is. When it's right in that position, in between those two lines, it's an F. Let's go back to our G, and let's say we move it up, so it's now in between these two lines. It's an A. Well, let's get, there's an A natural. And if we move it up one more, so it's now on this line, it's our B. If it's in between the next two lines, it's a C. On the next one, it's a D. In between the next two ones, it's an E. On the very last line, it's an F. Right sitting on top of that last line, it's a G. So you see how that makes sense, that it just moves up one line at a time. It's on, in between, and that corresponds with moving up one string at a time. It's beautiful. It's great. Now, let's go back to this middle C, because this middle C is below all these lines that make up the staff, and it's on this little line that's just appeared. And what happens is, as we've gotten up to this G that's right on this top, sitting on that top line, what if we want to play this A up here? How do we move it up? Well, what we do is we move up that little circle, and we draw a little line. We don't have to draw a line all along the whole staff. We just draw a line for that individual note to indicate that it's on that line. And if we wanted to play this, B, we would move it, keep that, draw a little line and put it on top of that. If we wanted to play this C, we would draw two little lines and put it right in the middle of that last line. So middle C, then, what we're doing, here's this G again. We move down, so now we're in between onto the F. Then we're on the very last line, and that's an E. We're below, right, that very last line. It's a D. And so now we have to draw an extra little line and put the note on that, and it's a C, middle C. So there's middle C. So once you have grasped the idea that we just move up, in between, on the line, in between, on the line, and that just moves up one string at a time, then the world's your oyster, because as long as you know where one particular note is, let's take this G, it's a very useful note. If you know that that G is indicated by this second, it being on the second to bottom line, then whenever you encounter a note, if you don't know what it is, you can always just say, well, let's count it up. So for example, let's say we have this note here, this where it's beneath the final line. So let's look at, okay, the G's right here on this line, so let's move it down one, between, down one on, down one under. Okay, it's this note right here, which is a D, G, F, E, D. And let's take, for example, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, which will start on middle C. So let's say we know that. Let's say we've memorized middle C. Middle C is indicated by this. Oh, and the next one is this G, our old friend G. And the next one, even if we don't recognize immediately what it is, we can see that it's just one up from the G. So then instead of being on the line, it's in between. So, and then back down. Now, obviously, to read music fluently, these notes will be memorized. You'll see this, and you'll know, oh, that's an A. You won't have to think about it. It's automatic. But as you're learning, you can use these tricks so that, again, this might be one of the first pieces that you learn, so you're still, oh, what's this note? Having to count. But so we've just finished that off with a G, and then, oh, the next one is just one below. Oh, and one below again, and again, and again. Now, I mentioned that, of course, to read music fluently, you'll need to have memorized all these notes. And as you start, for example, you'll probably want to spend a little bit of time just, say, playing a scale, looking at it, having a scale written out on your music, and starting, okay, here's middle C, and saying C, this is C, and oh, this is D, and E, and F, and G, and A, and getting used to that correspondence, that this visual corresponds with this string, and this string is an A. So that, reinforcing that, and you're playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, maybe some of the time saying the notes as you play them, so that it reinforces that connection between that, okay, I'm playing an A now, and an A looks like this, and it's found here. So that's the sort of three-way connection of the name of the note, where it is, and what it looks like on the page. And really, just as you're learning music, you're going to find that the reading comes, because as you start to learn more complicated things, you'll need to be able to read more fluently, and it will all just flow. But that beautiful fact that the notes just move up one line at a time, and that corresponds with each string, makes it quite easy to find notes, as long as you have some reference point, and eventually you'll have a lot of reference points. And you'll also, as I say, have sort of a reference point from the note you played last, so that, for example, some really high stuff, when they've got a whole bunch of these little ledger lines, I might have to say, okay, let me count this out. Is this a really high A? Is this a really high C? What? Let me just count that out. But if I had a reference point of, say, an arpeggio going up, then even if I didn't, and of course this would be an octave higher, even if I didn't immediately recognize that this is a C, if I saw this pattern, and I would know this bottom note, then I would recognize how this pattern looks, and I would know how to place it. So again, you might not know what this B is, because it's up here, or some ledger lines, but if you've just played this G, you'll see that it's a third up. It's not on the line, but it's the one like this that's in between lines, but it's not this one, it's the next one up. And so those reference points can help as well. So there you have it. You can now read treble clef. Let's take a moment to look at bass clef. And bass clef is generally for the left hand, and it's just referring to notes that are lower. Middle C is written so that it has a little extra ledger line up above. This C down here is written here. And again, just practice playing some scales, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and seeing where that falls on the bass clef and saying the notes as you play them, and again just finding them. So we look at this, we look at Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, for example, and okay, right, this is that C down there, and this is middle C, and then okay, well, on the left hand, this C, I know I just played the C, and it's 2 up, so it's this, and this one is 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, right, it's G. Oh yeah, here we are. And let's see, the right hand is 1 up, and the left hand is 1 up. And now they're both 1 down. And now let's see, the right hand's 1 down, the left hand is 2 up. And whoa, left hand's way down, but oh, that's the C down here. The right hand's just down 1. And the left hand's back. And what did we just play? Oh, maybe we remember it's this G, or maybe we have to count again. And oh, back to the C. So there you have it. That's how to find the notes to play. And I'm not sure if it'll be next week, but at some point I will talk about rhythm and how to determine when to play the notes that you found. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and see you again next week. Cheers.